All right, we now have $450, our latest bid on the foursome to join us for the KTRS Golf Tournament, June 9th at Normandy Golf Course, the fundraiser for St. Louis Honor Flight, Greater St. Louis Honor Flight. Is a wonderful cause and going to be a whole lot of fun. And so the latest bid is, what, $450. Trying to bump that up, get a little bit more for it. It's still under the value of $500, so you're still getting a deal. 314-969-KTRS, 1-888-550-KTRS, or star KTRS. Those are the phone numbers. Come on out. Should be a gorgeous day, a whole lot of fun. We know how to put on a golf tournament. No hanging around, a whole lot of fun and food beforehand. Then we're going to go play some golf, have a whole lot of fun. It should be nice weather. It won't be stifling hot. We'll have a whole bunch of food and drinks right after you get off the course, and then you're off and out for the rest of the weekend. Good way to start off the weekend. June 9th. The latest is $450. Go to ktrs.com for more information, and you can call us here. We will close out the bidding at 10 o'clock. Joining us now is Dr. Robert Criss, Professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at WashU University. Doctor, we first met you, it was a little over a year ago, was it not?
16 months.
When you came on the show and said that the levees in Valley Park were higher than previously thought, and that would cause flooding up and down the Merrimack River.
Yeah, so that's right. All this encroaching of the river makes a problem.
All right, so a year ago, 16 months ago, people were calling into question your research. I guess now that's settled. Everyone agrees that the levees are too high?
Oh, no. Most people blame climate change for these effects, but I think river encroachment is a even bigger part of the picture. And the thing about river encroachment, floodplain developments, this is something we can better control.
Right. So let's go to what happened 2 years ago in 2015 and what happened last week with the river and the rain. Was this rain biblical? I mean, they're calling it a 100-year flood, which, I mean, it's not the 500-year flood, not the 1,000-year flood. I mean, how bad of a flooding was this, and how bad should it have been?
It's a serious rainfall, but you know, the rainfall that makes the small basins respond very dramatically isn't the 10-day or 2-week rainfall that they're talking about. After all, these, you know, what is the relevance of heavy rainfall from, say, April 25th to May 4th when the flooding occurred on May 28th upriver?
Right.
It's, you know, what happens after the peak, what the heck? That's not what made the peak.
Right.
That propagates downstream. So it's actually the rainfall over only a few days that's important. And in that category, this was probably a 10 to a 25-year storm.
Right. So you're saying relatively normal that this flood, that this rainfall. So our systems and our infrastructure should be able to handle that.
Yes, well, this infrastructure that's actually the problem. It's if the rivers are encroached, there's floodplain development. We have levees that are too high. On the Mississippi, we have all these in-channel structures that have decreased the width of the river a factor of 2. And at Valley Park, you have a great big landfill in the floodway.
Right.
Lots of fill, plus homes in these low-lying areas. So all this encroachment squeezing the river makes the water higher, and then we have a lot of stuff that can be damaged, and that's what the tragedy is.
Right. This Valley Park levee that they built to save the levee, and then as you reported, or you sort of rang the bell a while ago, that they built the levee too high. Does that mean we get more flooding at 141 and 44 because of that levee? Do we get more flooding in other places because that levee saved downtown Valley Park?
Both. And there's, again, other factors. There's plenty of floodplain fill in Valley Park and Fenton that's backing the river up. There's that landfill. There's the levee that's too high.
Right.
And you combine all these things with heavy water, high water. The floodplain of a river is the land that's been topographically sculpted by the river because that's where the water goes.
Right.
And that's happened for thousands of years. And if we build homes in the wrong spot, this is going to happen. And now we're making the water even higher than it would be normally for a given amount of rainfall.
I mean, you think about it. Last week, we had, I don't know, 25%, 20% of the population that was cut off from the rest of the population because they couldn't cross the Merrimack River. I mean, that's unbelievable.
This would happen a year
Right?
ago.
I mean, think about that for a second. You couldn't get south of the Merrimack River. That's unbelievable in a 21st century modern city.
Right. It's damaging.
Right.
It damages more people than just the tragically affected homeowners.
Right.
This is something that should be fixed, and a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it is easily dealt with.
How do you deal with this current problem?
We quit aggravating the problem by stopping these continued series of river encroachments.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing is we stop zoning agricultural land in St. Louis County and proximal areas to be zoned commercial and zoned residential, which just encourages homes to be built in places where geologists and most engineers say they shouldn't be built.
Right. Is there anything to do about the current situation? Because if you stop doing everything or start doing everything you say, next time there's a couple of rainy days, the same thing is going to happen to the Merrimack, is it not?
Yes, to the homes that are there unless they are relocated.
Right.
And some of these repeatedly damaged properties should be relocated, and a wise government would be helping people to do that.
Right. I'm shocked that 141 and 44 was down for a week. I mean, that is a major intersection.
But it was down in 2008, too.
No.
It was flooded in 1994. I mean, what is it about this that we don't get?
Right.
It's going to happen again, and to the extent that we're getting heavier and heavier rainfall, it's going to be happening with increased frequency. But we can avoid magnifying the water levels.
Right.
We can avoid continuing this trend and maybe even start to reverse it a little bit.
I understand, but I mean, in terms of 141 and 44, is that now gone? You have to build an overpass? You have to redo it all?
Well, they should build an overpass at 141.
Well, right.
That's a no-brainer at this point.
Well,
they got to figure out how to do that.
I understand that, but I mean, there's nothing you can do to shape the river or a levee or anything else to save 44 and 141.
Well, it could be the landfill that's encroached on the floodway, and some of the floodplain fill in that area should be removed.
Right.
Some of the stuff we can do, and after all, there's train tracks there. We can move dirt.
Right.
It's a lot of dirt.
Yeah.
But we put it there. We got to be able to move it out.
What do you think, Dr. Robert Chris, of the articles in the Alton Telegraph a couple of weeks ago about the levees upstream that are now being measured and realizing that those levees were higher than they were supposed to be built?
To some extent, I've kicked open a hornet's nest, but it's actually a lot of this stuff and some of those levees, the Snai levee in particular, have been pointed out before as being too high.
Right.
And there it's quite interesting. You got the Mississippi River, and Illinois is on one side and Missouri's on the other.
Right.
So a high levee in Illinois dumps water on Missouri, and a high levee in Missouri dumps water on Illinois.
Right.
So these are, it's easy to see how this would happen.
Right.
And what the effect is.
Because there are two states competing for their own benefit to the detriment of the person on the other side of the river.
Right. And it's easily fixed. We have to have some sensible rules.
Right.
And the whole system is overbuilt, sometimes well in excess of what the regulations say.
Yeah.
And it's certainly well in excess of what common sense would say.
Yeah. This flooding, the Merrimack overflooded. The Missouri and the Mississippi sort of, I know there was some flooding, but it stayed within its banks for the most part. Why did the Merrimack go down or overflow worse than the others?
Worse than the big rivers?
Yeah.
Well, again, the big rivers shouldn't be flooding at all. The fact that we hit the third highest water level 16 months ago at St. Louis, and I think the sixth highest water level for hundreds of years, just last week, the big rivers should not be responding this way at all. That's because they're too encroached.
So you're saying that they should have taken this no problem whatsoever. They took it, but it was very high levels.
Think of what would have happened if we had this last week's storm or in the Amazon basin.
Mm-hmm.
You've just been paddling around going fishing.
That's where I wanted to take this conversation. Dr. Robert Chris is our guest. He's a professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Washington University. And about a year ago or so, you sort of rang the bell saying the levees are way too high. You said something on the show when you were on here the first time, which has always stuck with me. And there was a gentleman last week, it was reported, got caught in the flood and was swept away and died because of the raging waters. You say that doesn't happen in Africa. How come?
Well, the water flows pretty quickly in the main channel, but flooding is actually a gentle and natural process on areas on the floodplain and floodplain fringe.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a torrent. Many of the real problems are in areas where we have levee breaks. The iconic image, the video of this house helplessly swirling around in the maelstrom of the 1993 flood.
Right.
Everybody's seen this video of this swirling little house.
Right.
That's a levee break. That isn't natural flooding. That's what levee breaks are like a dam break. You not only end up with a high water, but you get a lot of mud because the water has so much energy.
Right. So it's a Jamestown flood situation.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas normally in Africa, where they don't have levees, the land might flood, but it's general and sort of meandering, and no animals are swept away because they can get out in plenty of time.
In a lot of places, like I say in the Amazon basin, big flood are the fat times. These are the times when life is good.
Yeah.
The river is not the enemy. It's our inability to deal with these landscapes.
What have the reaction been, politicians, elected officials, power brokers, to you ringing the bell 16 months ago to all this?
Well, I've probably got more detractors and supporters, but there are some very, very thoughtful people.
Right.
I was just on the river yesterday with Alderwoman Ingracia, and she's really tuned in. And there are people that understand that continued development is counterproductive.
Right. But the Army Corps of Engineers has sort of acknowledged that, hey, wait a minute, we need to do a better job of trying to figure out how high these levees really are.
Yes, well, that was the Rock Island district, not our St. Louis district.
Okay.
And the St. Louis district is finally, us too, we're the white hats, but they've been part of the problem in this area.
Robert Chris, professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Washington University. How did you get interested in floodplains and levees and all that stuff?
This is totally an accident. I was an oxygen and hydrogen isotope specialist.
Sure.
And I had done some groundwater studies and studies of springs, studies of hydrothermal systems before. What do you do with oxygen and hydrogen isotopes if you come to Missouri? Well, there's all these rivers.
Right.
So I just started sampling them and got interested in this particular problem.
That's how I would have done it. No question about it. Dr. Robert Chris, professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Washington University. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
9:23 here at Big 550.